The Faith in Fishing podcast is sponsored by 413 Lure Company. 413 Lure Company is a family-owned and operated business that puts Christ first and does things the right way, which shows in the way they treat their customers and in the quality of the products they're putting out. Their spinnerbaits, buzzbaits, swim jigs, bladed swim jigs, and football jigs are made with really high-quality components and come in a huge range of colors. Check out the show notes to follow a link to 413 Lure Company on Facebook to see their line and place your order today. Hey y'all, just wanted to take a quick minute to tell you about my friends over at Savur Outdoors. Savur makes retrieval devices for fishing rods, action cameras, and bow fishing bows to give you peace of mind out on the water. Attach this out-of-the-way compact float on your gear, and when, not if, it ends up in the water, it releases a float so you can get it back. And reload kits get your device ready for your next outing. Head on over to SavurOutdoors.com, that's SAVUR Outdoors.com, to learn more, and hit the shop tab and use promo code FNFP15 to save on your order. Welcome to the Faith in Fishing podcast, where you get to hear all kinds of fishermen tell their stories and share their faith. I'm your host, Cam Steele. Hey, how's it going, y'all? Welcome to the very first episode of the Faith in Fishing podcast. I'm your host, Cam Steele, and to get started, I'm just going to introduce you to myself and to the podcast, tell you a bit of my story, and give you an idea of what my vision is for the podcast and what you can expect going forward. Each week, I will be bringing you a new interview with some amazing guests from all parts of the fishing community. Some will be big names in the fishing industry, some will be pastors, some may be your next door neighbors. One of the first questions you will hear me ask will be, how did you get into fishing? And to introduce myself to you, here is my answer to that question. Some of my earliest memories are of fishing. My dad was a forest ranger, and he was able to get permission to fish a lot of different farm ponds and other private ponds that he would take me fishing with him when I wasn't in school. Sometimes we would go fishing for panfish. I remember one time in particular where I really got into some nice size shell crackers on a beetle spin or catfish, but normally we would be fishing for bass, especially with a panther martin. My grandpa had a creek behind his house, and there was bamboo growing all around it. Grandpa would take and cut a length of bamboo and wrap not even fishing line, but like little thread around the tip and tie on a real small hook, and we would roll little pieces of loaf bread into a little ball and catch knotty heads, dace, chubs, and other minnows. But yeah, I've been blessed to be able to spend time fishing with my dad, both my grandpa and my granddaddy. As I got a little older, fishing kind of took a back seat to basketball, and then basketball and fishing took a back seat to music as I started playing bass with a few different churches and with a couple different bands. But eventually I found my way back to fishing, especially from a kayak, and coming back to fishing was like coming home. I started out in a like $250, $300 Walmart kayak, and I got into kayak fishing because I was watching YouTube and saw a guy named Marty Zoffinger rigging out his kayak, and I was never really had a boat, never really fished out of a boat, so the idea of being able to do that was pretty cool, and was able to upgrade from there and really fell in love with kayak fishing. And moving on, one other really important question that I'll be asking is, what do you believe? And I feel it is important as the host of this show for me to give y'all my answer to that question, so here it goes. I believe there is one God who created everything by speaking it into existence. I believe that God created us in His image and gave us free will. With that free will, humankind, we sin. We're born into it. This world is full of it, and that started with the very first two people getting started in sin. Some of us try not to, but we fail. But here's the thing. God has a home for us called heaven. It is a perfect place where we get to spend eternity with God. God and sin cannot mix, though. And because we all sin, we can't get into heaven without help. Our help came in the form of Jesus, who is God's Son, fully God and fully man. Jesus came into our world and served as a sacrifice for any who accept and truly believe. Will have their slate washed clean by that sacrifice. Jesus was crucified and died, and that is how he served as a sacrifice, but that wasn't the end of the story. He was raised from the dead and appeared to many before he went back to heaven. And with that sacrifice, by truly believing and accepting that, his sacrifice covers our sin, and we are able to spend eternity with God from there. But yeah, so I spent some time fishing when I was younger, but I spent a lot of time in church. I didn't love it, but I became very good at playing the part. I knew all the answers, and I knew what to say, how to act, and to fit in at church. And once I got into middle school, I was in a pretty dark place. I came to, or that kind of darkness came to a peak in my freshman year of high school, when I started having suicidal thoughts and desires. And that is when I found grace. I was at a ski retreat. I was introduced to the gospel in a brand new way. A pastor named Andy Lambert was able to present the gospel with humor and emotion that met me right where I was. The lead singer of the band that was there, Everman, drove it home by explaining the friendship and relationship that he had with Jesus, which is something that I desperately wanted. So that night I sat in the hotel room and asked Jesus to save me. It was a while before I really understood what I did, but I would eventually, eventually the ball got rolling, or in terms of living for God. I was called into youth ministry. I spent a few years as a youth pastor, which was awesome. I found myself at a small church in a really small place called Deep Run, North Carolina, and had a great group of adult leaders and a really great group of young people. And a few years into that, I felt a new calling, and that was to be a husband to my then girlfriend, now wife. And if you wouldn't mind me bragging just a little bit, I have the most amazing, beautiful, and talented wife on the planet. Among other things, she is a potter, and I would just like to give a shameless plug here to her pottery business, Porch Dog Pots. You can check her pottery out on Instagram and Facebook just by searching Porch Dog Pots, and you can head over to www.porchdogpots.com, click the shop tab to buy some of her pottery for yourself. Anyways, that calling required a move from the small town in eastern North Carolina to the quote-unquote big city of Raleigh. I spent some time in sales before I found a job as an IT and maintenance man at a local bookstore, Quail Ridge Books, another shameless plug there, where I get to write reviews for all my favorite Bibles, fishing and nature books, and religious books. And I will touch on my reasons for starting this podcast on later episodes, but I will say that I am excited to merge my passion for fishing with my passion for Christ, and I am looking forward to seeing how God uses this podcast. There will be other questions, including a What's Your Favorite segment, and maybe I will get to answer some of those questions on another episode, but that will be the basic layout of the interviews. The podcast is going to air, so every new episodes will air every Tuesday at 5 a.m. And that way, if you are one like me who likes to listen to your podcast on the way to work, it will be ready for you. I will try to keep each episode somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 45 minutes. So some of the episodes will be two-parters. If the person I'm interviewing goes a little long, and that is because I definitely don't want to make anyone cut their story short. But with that being said, y'all, I'm really looking forward to this journey, and I'm excited to see where it takes me, and where it takes this podcast. Be sure to check out the other episodes that aired today. Didn't want y'all to be stuck only listening to me and not being able to hear a guest for a whole week. So we have parts 1 and 2 of an amazing guest out today as well. If you are even remotely familiar with the kayak fishing scene, you've already heard of him. And tune in to the next episodes for parts 1 and 2 of my interview with Mr. Chad Hoover. God bless. Thanks for listening to the Faith in Fishing Podcast. If you like this episode, please give it a rating, a review, and make sure to subscribe on whatever app you're listening to so you never miss an episode. You can follow the podcast on social media at facebook.com/faithinfishingpodcast and Instagram at faithinfishingpod. Special thanks and a big shout out to our show sponsor, 413 Lure Company, to Jonathan Inthelancy for helping me write, play, and record the music for the show, and to Tyler Worrell, the graphic designer behind our amazing logo. If you have any questions about faith, I encourage you to contact a pastor in your community. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, get out there and catch some fish, and I will catch you on the next episode.